good afternoon. Does anybody have an interest to talk about technology? I hope you have, and talk about the future, and connecting to the moderator here, if we want to keep the pace in this, in which the FMF has developed in just 3 years, 2040 will look very, very, very different, but that's our topic today. We have a very good cast of different views on the panel here, and I like to introduce who we have and go from left to right while we are going to start our first round, So we have the pleasure here today to have Rob Wood. Rob Wood has just taken on the role of being the commissioner for Saudi Arabia's new Geoscience Data Analytics Center. And he has a long experience in different things, private industry, as technology-oriented a lot, as well as public sector. And he's one of the few individuals who I have ever met who's been a vice minister in 2 nations. So you've been a vice minister in Canada, and you've been a vice minister in Australia. Now, if you ever want to find out how that happens, you have to marry the right woman. That's what I learned. So that's how it works. But I think the kingdom considers themselves very, very glad to have you, and we consider ourselves very happy to have you on here. So why don't we get this thing started? You have seen a lot on this planet. Maybe you talk a little bit about what is this Geoscience Data Analytics Center? Has a wonderful name. What are you doing? What are you planning to do? And what are you seeing around all the other things? You do other things also on top of this. What do you see happening in the mining sector?
Sure. So first off, thanks very much for that introduction, and thank you for having me on this panel. So the Geoscience Data Analytics Center is specifically designed to allow the kingdom to find new greenfield exploration targets all the way through to an inferred resource estimation, and to be able to do early stage environmental assessment. What we want to be able to do within the kingdom is de-risk mining and exploration. And obviously everybody understands that the 2 biggest risks for the private sector, the first is greenfield exploration, and then the second is, do you in fact actually receive environmental approval? The intent of this project is to use big data analytics to be able to advance that.
Fantastic. Fantastic. And you gave me, when we talked before, a few numbers on what the kingdom has already committed to doing and what you have already achieved. Maybe you want to share this with the greater audience here.
Sure. So this is an ambitious initiative, and as you heard yesterday, the kingdom, has an understanding and a belief that we have $2.5 trillion worth of potential, and of course, it's still at this point undiscovered. So, the investment, we're looking at about 1.7 billion rial for the initial investment, but the upside potential of that in terms of licensing fees and royalties, we're looking at about $27 billion within the business case lifespan, which really becomes a catalyst for more and more discoveries, more and more exploration licenses, more and more royalties. So as we want to create a third pillar of mining from an industrial perspective, this initiative of GDAC is absolutely front and center to the attainment of that.
And I thought, maybe you give us some more clarity on this. When this was opened yesterday by His Minister, His Excellency Bandar Al-Khurayev, he mentioned that what the kingdom has in mind as a very investor-friendly approach, instead of saying, you can apply here for just a mining license, you already have a lot of data there and also have an environmental survey. And so the product that you're handing over is not just a plot of land and do with it, find it out. Is that the right understanding?
Yeah, far from it. So this will be the single most advanced analytic system for exploration on the planet, and indeed for environmental assessment. So we're on the cusp with machine learning that even within the last 2 to 3 years, 2 fundamental things have come about. So you've all heard of ChatGPT and large language models. Well, there's a particular flavor of those called named entity recognition, where we're able to read virtually any kind of document, and in particular scientific documents related to geology and earth sciences. And not only can we read them, we can hold them, the information persistently, we can geospatially locate everything, and it's at a global scale. This is not something that is only going to happen within KSA data. It's actually going to happen across.
Yeah, I think that is very, very cool. And when you mentioned for the first time ChatGPT as large language models, I mean, I didn't quite get what you wanted as an application, but I think what you say is there's a lot of data already available, but in written format, and it would take a lot of people to code it. And that's where it comes in. You can automate that, you can have it coded, and then it becomes part of the data that will flow into the algorithm, make this process seamless, which is really, I mean, absolutely out there, absolutely on the forefront of what's happening worldwide.
Well, and then we can take it the next step, Klaus, which is what they call multimodal learning.
Right.
So you can take all of the images, all of the language, and all of the numbers, and when you build complex models to, say, understand a deposit signature, you're actually using the data of all of those to, in fact, actually find them. And if you imagine it, in 2024, greenfield exploration is considered to be incredibly risky. By 2040, it's actually not going to be anywhere near as risky as it has.
Yeah, exactly, and the speed in which this progresses. But we're going to talk more about it.
Yeah.
So the next panelist here is Satish Rao. He's the Chief Innovation Officer of New Lab. And New Lab is a deep tech venture platform that has a location of New York, which is the origination, now Detroit, which is even 4 times larger than New York, and Uruguay. And you announced yesterday, that you are now coming to KSA and building the first deep tech hub here in the kingdom, and Riyadh will be the first place, but with a couple of satellites around the kingdom. And as partners, you announced to have Ma'aden as startup partners on the industry side, Ma'aden and Aramco, and then a lot of the government entities supporting, from the ministries, to NITLIB, and having made this happen. So first of all, we're very happy about this announcement. This is going to it's going to become a focal point, much like it has become at all these places, for inventors, to go to, because what you're doing is you're taking people who want to scale up, and basically have proof of concept, and that's where also an advantage of the kingdom comes in, because there's a lot of, test grounds here, that startups need, and also then it comes around funding and all of these things, So Satish, you should probably describe a little bit more on what you do, because having worked in the mining industry myself, I tell you, there are very few industries that are as resistant as the mining industry to adopt something new. And the reality is because it's a safety culture. We're handling stuff that is dangerous in most cases, and we don't want to hurt anybody. We talked about the last panel here, standards, that all plays into it. Why are you optimistic, that you picked mining as a tough one, well, which you always do, as your first kind of studio, your first program. And I understand that you already had a program at your mothership for 4 years, in the mining industry, with the likes of BHP being the supporter. So how is that going to work, and what do you see there?
Yeah, and thanks, Klaus, for that introduction. So our platform, we call that a platform because we believe deeply that these deep tech startups that are really trying to change the world need help in multiple ways, right? And so one of the first things we think about is the application of infrastructure. So how can we help these companies build their products? And we do that through the labs that we operate. How do we help them test and develop? We do that through the access we have to infrastructure assets for testing and development. We invest in these companies through different vehicles and bring in the industry partners to be the early adopters through our programs. Mining was actually our first industry, serendipitously through one of our investors. That was great. That brought us into mining. And it was a great industry to start in, Klaus, because of the challenges you described.
But you love to take the biggest challenges first.
Exactly.
Right? Exactly. Why make it easy? Why not start with the hard stuff?
Exactly right. Exactly right. And I think, one of the mining, from a cultural perspective, from an operational perspective, you have one shot around an ore body. The entire construction around that, which you know very well, is already quite challenging to kind of break into from an innovation perspective. Where we've seen progress actually is being able to pull innovation from adjacent industries where things have been proven. And the first that we saw was, of course, the use of data and AI, right? So that's been established in other industries, and now that's definitely making its impact in mining. The second was automation. And so by being able to show mining companies how automation is being deployed in industries that kind of look like them, but aren't quite them, has been able to build that inspiration and even define some of the pilot projects we did. So that led to some traction as well. I think what's most exciting, actually, and this is a lead into the other panelists, is the application of biology. And so we know mining has a history of that, certainly using biology in mining, such as copper. But the ability to sort of modify organisms in a way that can be applied to other types of mining, such as rare earths, allows us to rethink what a source of metal really looks like. And that's critically important when we talk about stable, critical, resilient supply chains that are also local. And so that type of thinking is very much relevant to the kingdom. And so I think that's a great segue.
Yeah, and so you are not, I mean, you have multiple lenses, I think, right? You mentioned it in passing, but I think it's important to carve that out. I mean, so I think what I understand from you, one of your lenses is also the sustainability lens, because it sounds as though, and we might have more on this discussion, it sounds as though you are convinced that, I mean, it's not just about efficiency, which mines have traditionally been driven by come with something that makes it more efficient, that brings us down the cost curve. You are saying, well, there has to be a separate, are you saying, I don't want to put words in your mouth.
For sure.
Are you saying there has to be a different lens to it?
For sure. I mean, if we think about now something as like electrification, the fact that we're trying to electrify every system we have in the world is redefining supply chains and value chains as we know it. And so our access, the access and demand for the types of metals we need then mandates that sustainability is defined across that entire value chain. So mining is in the focus now. And so what are the things that we can deploy to bring sustainability in a way that's meaningful for the business? That's the intersection we always try to play out. So we're not saying, hey, be sustainable for sustainability's sake. There should be a mission behind that, but we also understand there's a business here that needs to be run. So how do we build efficiency in a way that's sustainable? Automation, the application of data, the application of biology, all those things together allow us to look at things like waste. Or look at things like circularity and other sources such as that. Ore bodies that were once not necessarily applicable to mining now are because of these types of new technologies that are available to the industry if there's that interest in sort of backing to scale those things.
And what I heard you say before is that you said, yes, there is traditionally a reluctance to take innovation. However, what you have been able to manage and support in the studio is to showcase existing technologies used in other industries and then an application how this would look like in mining, by this automatically de-risking the approach. That's what you saw?
And in fact, it becomes almost a strategy for us, right? So if you're going up to an industry, I can't necessarily point to an example of a peer, but I can point to another industry that's taking on that kind of risk that we're asking you to take on when it comes to investing and trying to scale this technology. And so automation was an example I gave before. When we talk about things like biology, we can point to other industries that kind of produce these things at scale, can point at cost models of how these things work, and then kind of use that as a way to build up what the pilot concept looks like, right? And so being able to show from a data perspective, okay, if the technology can do X, Y, and Z, then this lets me de-risk this in a way that allows me to open up my operations to take this innovation in. And so that's the mindset we constantly have, not just in mining, but actually in all the industries we work in.
And that's also where the network effect comes in that you are bringing to the table. Fantastic.
Exactly.
Really, I mean, great that you're coming here. Really, really great that you're
We're very
coming
excited.
here.
We're very excited.
Super,
yes.
super. So the next person we have on stage here is Chuck Price. You know, Chuck Price is the Chief Operating Officer of Allonia. You know, and he has got 30 years of experience. You know, in executive roles in industry. You know, you also worked at one point in time for Solvay. You know, and in their mining solution. You know. And but then you found your way, and you want to talk about it more, into a startup, you know, and you were crazy enough to join at an early point. I want to learn more about what happened here, you know. So it was super successful executive career, you know, and then saying, no, I'm going to reinvent something, and the something was around biotech, you know. And so maybe you tell us a little bit on what happened and what made you go to Allonia, and what the hell does Allonia do, and why in mining, you know? So
Thank you, Klaus. It's a number of questions you just threw out. Career decisions.
you can take it one by one, you know. So.
Yeah, one by one. So thanks for that introduction. It's really a pleasure to be here. So Alonia is, as you said, a biotechnology company. We are founded on a mission, and it's the mission that was the attraction for me. But the mission is the idea that nature can be harnessed to solve some of the world's toughest environmental challenges. And there are plenty of environmental challenges in mining. We have some other vertical markets we participate in, but this is a mining conference, so I'll talk a little bit more about that. So there's that mission that attracted me. And why do we feel like it's possible that nature could be harnessed in this way? It's because nature operates the original circular economy. Anything that's produced in nature, whether it's some byproduct or some waste, is a happy source of energy or food for some other species. And everything goes around in a circle. Nothing's wasted in nature. So if you could take that principle and even the biology, the actions that are taking place, and harness them towards mining applications, you might be able to solve some of these challenges. So that's how we were founded. We have two real platforms that we're working on. And if you guys will allow me to talk a little bit about technology, I'll try to keep it simple. The first one we call biosolubilization. So biosolubilization every microbe is generating, in its process of doing that decomposition I was talking before, it generates metabolites. And if you can use these microbes as a little mini chemical factory and capture those metabolites, those can be used as a solvent, we call a biosolvent, or a biobroth. And if you apply those biosolvents to certain mining materials, ore bodies, tailings, maybe concentrate, what we've discovered is that they have an ability to solubilize the gangue materials, the stuff you don't want that's in that mineral matrix, which is pretty fascinating. So if you've got, let's say, iron ore, it'll solubilize the calcium and the magnesium and the silica, but leave the iron in the solid phase. That provides a mining separation technique. That's what mining's all about, is separation techniques. So that provides an upgrading of the ore proportionally, which is interesting from an economic standpoint. But when you take these penalty elements out of the ore body, especially if it's going to a smelter or some other downstream process, you create some tremendous ESG benefits, greenhouse gas reduction, energy reduction at the smelter, for example. That's two benefits. You've got the economics, you've got the downstream benefit. And then something we're just discovering, and I would talk to a number of people about it at this show, which is pretty cool, is that stream that you generate of those gangue materials can be used as a carbon sink for CO2 sequestration.
Wow.
Bubble some CO2 through that, you form precipitated basically a calcium carbonate or a silica carbonate or a magnesium carbonate. You've got a geological level sequestration of CO2, which is an important driver for a lot of mining companies. So really interesting from the biosol standpoint. The other one, and I'll be quick because I've talked a bit here, biocementation. Microbes and enzymes can be used to induce calcite precipitation. And in some sort of a mining matrix, what you've basically done is create cement. You can agglomerate particles. That agglomeration can be used for geotechnical stability. Tailings dams, tailing stacks, dry stacking, even dust control. So through microbially induced, mouthful, or enzymatically induced calcite precipitation, you create biocements for
And
safety
is this,
aspects.
kind of more the future, or do you have already kind of first installations, where you are proof of concept and that sort of thing?
Yeah, it's a good point. We're like at a TRL4 type of location, but a lot of interest. We're doing plenty of lab work, and we're gearing up to go to the next level, which would be demo scale, kilo production in continuous batch processes, or continuous processes.
And I understand that there is also a relationship to New Lab. You tell me more about it.
Well, we've worked together, New Lab, to talk about how we might provide these kind of incubators and connections between mining majors and startups like ourselves. And they also convinced us to come down here. Didn't convince us, I don't want to make that sound like we had to be convinced, but brought us here, and it's been a tremendous networking opportunity.
And would there be opportunities here in the kingdom for you that you see?
I think so. Talked to a number of companies here, gold producers. There's also interest. We could take a look at phosphates, so absolutely.
Yeah, Marden is a big phosphate.
Absolutely.
producer, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. I mean, very good. Very good. So let's move on, and we'll have more opportunities, to Jesse. Jesse Evans, is the Chief Operating Officer and co-founder of Maverick Biometals. That name alone is worth gold, So, and you decided, if I understood you correctly, right after college, right after university, to say, hey, you know what? we're founding this company and we're doing X, Y, Z, and we're choosing to do it in the mining field, you know. So you didn't even go into industry. That's the young generation, you know how it works these days, you know. So they don't even feel that they need to have industry. We both smile about this, right? But okay, so
We have gray hair.
exactly. You know, so Jesse, tell us more about what is Maverick Biometals doing.
Yeah, thank you. So, coming into industry at an earlier age, so at Maverick Biometals, we are using enzymes for bioextraction. These enzymes solubilize ore at near room temperature with low reagents, and so it's a lot more energy efficient, fewer pollutants, fewer environmental damages. We've worked with over 35 metals in the lab so far, over 15 minerals. Done a lot of work with silicates, with phosphates, lithium and rare earth elements. And kind of going to the founding, your original question, my co-founder and I have known each other for about 10 years. He worked at a national lab in the United States as a synthetic biologist, doing a lot of work with enzymes as therapeutics in medicine. And he enjoyed the work, took a drug through FDA trial there, but he found medicine not as rewarding from an environmental standpoint, you know, and so him and I have known each other for a long time. We started tossing around ideas as we've seen biotech come about to really benefit industry. We thought, well, what are some of the hardest and most challenging but most rewarding ideas that we could tackle from a sustainability standpoint? And we thought, well, you know, mining has a lot of potential. You know, there are a lot of environmental pollutants and a lot of energy being used, and biotech is a way to really lower the energy and even.
And what is your prime focus now? I mean, as you are going ahead, I mean, started broad. Are you still broad, or are you saying no? This is the thing that we are going to shoot for first.
Yeah, so bioextraction is a broad platform where we can extract really any metal from any silicate or phosphate. A lot of our focus has been on lithium and rare earth elements. Phosphates would be most interesting here in the kingdom for rare earth.
To add lithium out of waste streams, for instance.
Yeah, we work with a variety of streams from greenfield to waste. We've done a lot of work in tailings, but also with new mines.
Okay, very cool.
Yeah. So we are working in the lab now with a few majors in testing a lot of their ore from greenfield sites, but also from waste, and scaling up our technology as new mines scale up in the U.S.
And if somebody were to come to you and say, "Hey, I got a waste stream here, which I would turn over to you, show your magic, do the Maverick on that," you know, what would you say?
Well, I would say let's give it a shot. So we have a library of.
So if anybody is in the audience, you know, has a waste stream that you want to turn into value, you know, so he's the right guy to talk to, you know. So fantastic. Okay, so time's running fast. I'm looking at the clock. So why don't we just jump to what the panel also wanted to talk about, 2040. You know, we talked a bit about kind of groundbreaking changes, you know, but if there's one thing I've learned in my life is technology changes are not continuous. They are step functions, you know, and I mean, about a year ago, I mean, if we would have had this audience and mentioned ChatGPT, everybody would have looked into the air and said, what the hell is this? You know, and it actually not only put ChatGPT on the list, but it put the power of AI into the consumer hands. And I would assume that a lot of people here in the room use it in their daily lives, you know, because it has become an enormously powerful tool. Yeah. So if we think about 2040 mining, what do you think are the biggest changes that you would see, independent of what you're doing, you know? But if it's what you're doing, then please feel free to mention it. Rob, you.
So two things. We've already talked about the fact that all types of data globally is going to be available. But and it will have great benefits to exploration and to other phases of mining. And the one thing I think that we don't necessarily think about, but all of this new data will be democratized. It's going to be open. And the last panel that was up was talking about sustainability and the responsibilities that companies have. And what they're going to see by 2040 is that the amount of rigor and the the oversight that they're going to have, both from governments and from local communities, is going to be really significantly greater than it is now. So ESG is real. You're seeing governments now building their own ESG frameworks with real KPIs, and that they're going to democratize that information. They're going to be talking about how well the company.
So I think when you say democratize, it would mean also that governments have a much stronger, governments and communities have a much stronger capability to monitor what companies are doing, So doesn't that almost go to a point, I mean, if you are in the mining industry, which has traditionally not been very open to ESG concepts, so this, you better change now, because ESG is going to become the standard, and you literally will have to earn on a daily basis your right to exist.
And that's the biggest difference, right? So we talk about social license.
Social license.
We think of it as a front-end process to get our project off the ground. What's going to be happening is a much more intensive process where it is a daily process of earning trust and earning that license.
Satish, what's on your mind?
Yeah, I mean, specifically to the kingdom, looking at aspects of the vision around, the advancements of infrastructure, right? From construction to data infrastructure, electrification, all things related to energy. The demand for certain materials that traditionally are relying on imports will start to go up. And so the counterpart to that is to invest in things that allow for that to become more internal. So localizing supply chains, which brings it back to mining. So the ability for the kingdom to produce the materials that it needs is really fascinating. And so that inherently will demand advanced technologies to sort of be able to produce that here in this economy. And so if we take it back to mining, that means that the need for new types of data and AI for exploration, right? Identifying where those sources are, new ways of extracting those metals and materials from those sources that are not very traditional, the application of biology. And so from a new lab perspective, being able to develop a platform here that could bring those technologies to bear is what we're most excited about.
Super. Please.
Yes, I think if you think about 2040, the stakes are pretty clear, and most of the panels have talked a lot about two things. One, the ESG drivers, the sustainability drivers, the need to get greenhouse gas reduction. All of those are going to be, by 2040, much more important. They're important today. So there's that. And the other is the mix of metals and minerals is going to be very different in 2040 than it is today also. The electrification of the world is going to require, I heard all different kinds of numbers, but a lot more copper, a lot more lithium, a lot more cobalt, a lot more rare earths, for example. So when you look at getting from where we are today to where we need to be in 2040, which in mining terms is not that long from now, it's going to take real breakthrough step change innovation, to use your term. And I think that comes from places like biotechnology, which are new. It's not incrementalized. There's a lot of ground we can cover through biosolutions, and AI as well, digital learnings. And maybe the third would be a collaborative approach like you were talking about, Satish. Bringing together startups like ourselves who need some funding, who need access, who need patience from mining majors and others together with the technology that we can bring can be a powerful way for us to get across that gap.
Very good. Please.
Yeah, I'll echo what you said, Chuck, about collaboration. 2040 is a lot closer than we think, and we don't need to wait until 2040 to implement these new technologies. And so working with mining companies, early scaling up our technologies with them as they identify new assets or new waste streams. It was mentioned on a panel earlier, but I also see mining in 2040 be more vertically integrated on the mine site and actually have processing on the site and not shipping raw ore to different locations. And I think that's the benefit of biotech, actually, being able to do less expensive processing from an OpEx and a CapEx standpoint, actually on site.
Yeah, and a lot of that would depend on what drives the cost, because in the end it will always be still continue to be a commodity market, so cost efficiency is going to be strong. So today, one of the reasons why you separate it is because for the mining process, they are far away from where you have energy, where you can ship it, so that allows not only for a separation, but mandates a separation almost, So thank you very much, really, really good, and I think we could go on for another long time, but I think we have to move on. The next panel is waiting, Thank you very much. Thank you for attending. I hope you enjoyed it a little bit, But one thing I think for sure is 2040, mining is going to look a lot different. And even though, Chuck, you said, most likely we will continue to have things like copper, rare earth elements, but I would make the bet that there will be elements that, like rare earth, who had heard of the rare earth elements, 20 years ago? But today they are in everybody's mind, There will be elements that we do not have on our list and that the world will be chasing, So that's for sure. And whoever gets that idea first, is going to make a good buck, Thank you very much. See you all again. Bye-bye. Thank you.